3 weeks after burying Malcolm, my beloved husband, I dragged myself to my nephew Devon's 2nd birthday. The black dress was still my uniform, grief still my companion. Jasmine's cramped apartment in Dakar buzzed with family, oblivious to the void inside me. I watched Devon tear into his presence, forcing a smile. Then Jasmine stood, clinking her fork against a plastic cup. The room hushed. Her expression, part nervous, part triumphant, sent a cold prickle down my spine. "My son is your husband's child, Regina. As his rightful inheritance, I'll be taking half of your $500,000 house in East Point." She waved a document, Malcolm's will, like a trophy. My heart hammered. "Oh, I see," I managed, suppressing a laugh that threatened to burst. Jasmine had forgotten one crucial detail, a secret that rendered her entire scheme impossible. But before I tell you what that was, you must understand what Malcolm and I built, what she so eagerly sought to claim. Malcolm and I had 28 beautiful, difficult, precious years. I met him in 1996, a 3-4-year-old student chasing an accounting dream. Most women might have overlooked him. Older, working 2 jobs, same 3 shirts in rotation. But when he stayed after class, asking about comma usage, his quiet determination made my heart skip. He'd grown up poor, worked construction for 15 years, saving every penny. After his mother's stroke at 52, Malcolm decided life was too short for deferred dreams. He enrolled in my English composition course. "Miss Regina," he'd said, "I know I'm not the smartest, but I'll work harder than anyone." He kept that promise. He stayed after every class, rewrote assignments twice. When he struggled with research papers, I found myself staying late, walking him through citations. Somewhere between semicolons and the light in his eyes when he grasped paragraph structure, I fell completely in love. We married in 1997, a small ceremony at Mount Olive Baptist. We felt like we could conquer the world. Our honeymoon was a weekend in Savannah, all we could afford. But Malcolm made me feel like a queen. For the next decade, I poured everything into his education. Double shifts, tutoring, teaching summer school. I packed his lunches, typed his papers, celebrated every A. When he graduated summa cum laude at 41, I cried harder than he did. "None of this happens without you," he whispered. We were a team. Malcolm landed his first accounting job in East Point. We found a modest 3-bedroom ranch, $180,000 in 2003, needing work. He saw the potential beneath the old carpet, in the kitchen that just needed some love. For 20 years, we poured our souls into that house. We refinished floors. Malcolm learned plumbing from YouTube. I painted every room. When his diabetes was diagnosed in 2010, our world shifted. Our partnership only deepened. I learned carbs, blood sugar, his subtle cues. He struggled with restrictions, missing sweet tea and barbecue, but committed to health. "Too much living left to do with my wife," he joked during his worst days. The diabetes brought complications. His vision deteriorated, affecting his work hours. Still, he improved our home. New crown molding, azalea bushes blooming every spring, a testament to our enduring marriage. By his passing, our little ranch was worth nearly $500,000. Not just market value, but decades of love, labor, and shared dreams. The kitchen where he taught me his grandmother's cornbread, the living room where he balanced books and I graded papers beside him, the master bedroom where he held my hand through my scares and I held his in his final weeks. Malcolm died on a Tuesday in March, his kidneys finally overwhelmed. I held his hand, whispering promises I'd be okay. The funeral was a blur of flowers and casseroles. Standing in our empty house, surrounded by sympathy cards, the lingering scent of his cologne, I felt half my soul ripped away. That house was worth 28 years of marriage, countless dreams, the physical embodiment of a love story. Now my sister wanted half, based on a lie, a child who couldn't possibly be Malcolm's. She had no idea who she was truly dealing with. Underestimating a grieving widow, with nothing left to lose, was Jasmine's biggest mistake. The party ended in chaos. Family whispered, glances darting between me and Devon. I played the devastated widow, needing time to process the shocking news. Jasmine wasn't finished. As guests left, she approached, clutching those papers. "Regina, "Honey, I know this is overwhelming. Why don't you stay so we can talk privately?" The last thing I wanted was another second with her, but I needed to see how deep this deception ran. Once alone, her false sympathy vanished, replaced by a cold calculation that made my skin crawl. She spread the will documents on her small kitchen table. "I didn't want to embarrass you." Malcolm left specific instructions for Devon's inheritance. My hands trembled as I read. The document stated Malcolm revised his will 2 months before his death, acknowledging Devon Williams as his son, bequeathing him 50% ownership of our East Point property at 18. Jasmine, Devon's guardian, would manage it. The will looked official. Hartwell and Associates letterhead, Malcolm's signature, even witness signatures I didn't recognize. Something felt fundamentally wrong. "When did Malcolm supposedly write this?" I whispered. Jasmine leaned back, studying me like a predator. "January 15th, she said without hesitation. "He came to see me after a doctor's appointment. Said his diabetes was worse. He needed to make things right." January 15th. I remembered that day. Malcolm had been exhausted after his endocrinologist appointment, napping for 3 hours. The idea he'd driven to Decatur to confess an affair to Jasmine seemed impossible. "He told me everything," Jasmine continued, her voice rehearsed. "How you two had problems. How lonely he felt when you were always working late. How he needed someone who understood him." Each word was a dagger, not because I believed her, but because of her cruelty. She was rewriting my marriage, painting Malcolm as unfaithful, me as a neglectful wife. "The affair started 3 years ago," she went on, showing me photos of Devon. "Look at his eyes, Regina, his chin. That's all Malcolm." I studied the pictures of my nephew. Devon was beautiful. Jasmine's dark complexion, bright smile, no Malcolm in his features. Still, I played along, nodding. "Malcolm was torn up about it," she said. "He loved you, but couldn't live with the guilt. That's why he changed his will. Devon deserved to inherit from his real father." The manipulation was audacious. She'd crafted a narrative portraying herself as a tormented other woman, me as the oblivious wife. She even gave Malcolm noble motivations for his infidelity. "So, what happens now?" I asked, barely above a whisper. A flash of triumph crossed Jasmine's face. "The house needs to be appraised for Devon's inheritance. I've already contacted a realtor friend. She thinks we could get at least $500,000, maybe more with a kitchen update." She was already spending my money, planning to renovate the home Malcolm and I built. The casual way she discussed dismantling my life made my stomach churn. "I know this is hard," she said, patting my hand with false compassion. "But think about Devon. He's your nephew, and now Malcolm's son. This is what Malcolm wanted, his way of caring for both of you." I pulled my hand away, fighting the urge to tell her the truth. Instead, I gathered the will documents, rising slowly, as if crushed by the revelation. "I need time to process all of this," I said, my voice shaking with what she mistook for grief, but was rage. "This changes everything I thought I knew about my marriage." Jasmine walked me to the door, her arm possessively around my shoulders. "Take all the time you need. But Regina, the legal papers are already filed. This isn't going away." Driving home through darkening Atlanta streets, those documents beside me felt like toxic waste. The timing was wrong, the language off. Malcolm never mentioned a lawyer named Hartwell. In 28 years, he never made a major decision without me. As I reread the will in my driveway, something didn't add up. Then I remembered something Malcolm had done, something Jasmine had clearly forgotten. Something that made her entire scheme not just cruel, but medically impossible. I closed my eyes, drifting back to October 2018. Devon would have been conceived around January or February 2019. That meant Jasmine claimed Malcolm fathered a child approximately 4 years after his vasectomy at Emory Healthcare. I remembered that autumn vividly. It was a scary time. Malcolm's diabetes worsened, threatening his kidneys and heart. During a frightening appointment, Dr. Chun discussed family planning. "Malcolm's condition is difficult to manage. Any future pregnancy would stress both partners. We need permanent solutions." Malcolm was quiet, holding my hand. We'd always planned children, but careers and health issues kept us postponing. Now, at 56 and 52, we faced a childless future. "What are our options?" I asked, my voice barely steady. Dr. Chun explained a vasectomy would be the safest, most effective permanent birth control. It would eliminate pregnancy risk, allowing Malcolm to focus on his diabetes. We spent weeks discussing it. I saw the pain in his eyes, a door closing we always assumed would remain open. But his health was deteriorating. Bringing a child into that world wouldn't be fair. "Regina, baby," he'd said one evening on our porch, watching the sunset. "I need to know you're truly okay with this. Once we do this, there's no going back." I held his hands, looking into those brown eyes. "Malcolm Williams, you are enough for me. You always have been. If it's just us, that's the greatest blessing." The vasectomy was performed October 23, 2018, by Dr. Rodriguez, a urologist specializing in diabetic patients. I remembered the date precisely. Our wedding anniversary. Malcolm nervously joked it wasn't the celebration he'd planned. The procedure went smoothly, but recovery was slower due to his diabetes affecting healing. Dr. Rodriguez was clear. At least 3 months for his system to clear viable sperm, then follow-up tests to confirm success. Those tests in January 2019 confirmed it. Malcolm was definitively sterile. Dr. Rodriguez smiled, telling us the vasectomy was successful, pregnancy no longer a concern. January 2019. The exact period Jasmine claimed Malcolm conceived Devon. Sitting in my driveway, those fraudulent documents in my lap, a mix of grief and fury washed over me. Grief for the children Malcolm and I never had. Fury, because Jasmine used an innocent child as a weapon to steal from me. But more than anything, a cold, calculated determination settled over me like armor. Jasmine thought she was dealing with a broken widow. She had no idea she'd just handed me the information that would destroy her entire fabrication. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Dr. Chun's number. As Malcolm's primary care physician for a decade, he'd have complete records of the vasectomy referral and follow-up. He'd also been at Malcolm's bedside, potentially testifying about his mental state. My next call was to Robert Morrison, Malcolm's attorney and friend. Robert drafted our actual wills 5 years ago, was a pallbearer at Malcolm's funeral. If anyone knew about changes to Malcolm's legal documents, it was Robert. "Regina." His voice was warm with concern. "How are you holding up?" "Robert, I need to see you first thing tomorrow. Something's happened. Urgent legal advice." "Of course. What time?" 8. "And Robert, bring copies of Malcolm's will, the real one. Someone is claiming he made unauthorized changes." A pause. "Regina, Malcolm never made changes after we drafted it in 2018. I would have handled any modifications. There weren't any." Relief flooded through me. That was exactly what I needed to hear. "I'll explain everything tomorrow, but Robert, someone is trying to defraud me with forged documents. In that case, you might consider law enforcement. This sounds criminal." "Not yet," I said firmly. "I want all my evidence first. I want this case airtight." After hanging up, I sat in the growing darkness, formulating my plan. Jasmine thought she held all the cards, but she made one crucial mistake. She chose to lie about a man whose medical history I knew better than my own. Malcolm's vasectomy wasn't just a procedure. It was documented, witnessed, verified by multiple professionals. Surgical reports, preoperative consultations, post-operative follow-ups, laboratory results, confirming sterility, evidence that couldn't be forged or explained away. Jasmine wanted to play games with fraudulent wills and fabricated affairs. Fine. But she was about to learn some truths are carved in stone. Malcolm's inability to father children after October 2018 was one of them. I gathered those fake documents and walked into my empty house, feeling more determined than since Malcolm's funeral. Tomorrow, I would build the case that would destroy Jasmine's lies. She thought she was stealing from a helpless widow. Instead, she was about to face a woman with nothing left to lose, and medical evidence that would expose her as a fraud. The next morning, I sat in Robert Morrison's office at 8, clutching a manila folder with Jasmine's documents. Robert's office was a sanctuary. Law books, family photos, the scent of coffee and leather, stability and trust. "Regina," Robert said, "I've thought about our conversation. Before your documents, let me show you something." He pulled a thick folder labeled Williams, Malcolm and Regina Estate Planning. From it, official documents bound with blue legal backing. This is Malcolm's actual will, executed April 14, 2018, Robert explained, placing it before me. He leaves everything to you, with contingent beneficiaries being your sister Jasmine and her children, only if something happened to both of you simultaneously. I compared the real will to Jasmine's forgery. The differences were stark. Fonts didn't match. Legal language was completely different. Most tellingly, the witness signatures on Jasmine's version belonged to strangers. Malcolm's real will was witnessed by Robert's legal secretary and paralegal, people I'd met many times. Robert, how difficult to get Malcolm's medical records from Emory Healthcare? I asked. For you, as his widow and beneficiary? Not difficult. What specifically? I took a deep breath, explaining the vasectomy, Devon's conception timeline, the medical impossibility of Jasmine's claims. Robert's expression grew serious. Regina, this isn't just fraud. This is potentially criminal conspiracy. We need documentation of everything. He reached for his phone. I'm calling Dr. Chun's office right now for Malcolm's complete medical file. Within an hour, we had confirmation. Records ready for pickup that afternoon. But medical evidence alone wouldn't suffice. I needed to understand why Jasmine did this. What drove her to such desperation? Robert, I need a private investigator, someone to discreetly look into Jasmine's financial situation. Robert nodded, pulling out contacts. Maria Santos, former Atlanta PD, specializes in financial fraud. 2 hours later, I sat with Maria Santos in a coffee shop. Maria, a compact woman in her 40s with sharp, trustworthy eyes, took detailed notes. Mrs. Williams, Maria said, these elaborate fraud schemes usually stem from financial desperation. People don't risk family relationships and criminal charges unless backed into a corner. How quickly can you look into her finances? I asked. 48 hours. I'll need your sister's full name, address, any details you can provide. I gave Maria everything. Her apartment, employer, even Devon's father's name. Maria assured me of thoroughness and discretion. That afternoon, I collected Malcolm's medical records from Emory Healthcare. Dr. Chun's office had prepared a comprehensive file spanning a decade of care, including the vasectomy consultation, surgical notes, and post-operative confirmation of sterility. In my car, I reread Dr. Rodriguez's surgical report, dated October 23, 2018. The clinical language was devastating to Jasmine's case. Bilateral vasectomy completed successfully. Patient counseled regarding permanent sterility. Post-operative semen analysis scheduled for January 2019 to confirm absence of viable sperm. The follow-up lab results from January 8, 2019 were equally clear. Semen analysis confirms azoospermia. Vasectomy procedure successful. Patient may discontinue backup contraception. Azoospermia, complete absence of sperm. Medically impossible for Malcolm to have fathered any children after that date. Maria called 2 days later with information that made my blood run cold. Regina, your sister is in serious financial trouble. She owes approximately $75,000 across multiple credit cards, medical bills, and a personal loan. She's 3 months behind on rent, eviction papers filed. Her car was repossessed last month, but that wasn't the worst. I also found interesting connections, Maria continued. Your sister has been meeting regularly with a man named Jerome Hartwell, the same name on that fake will's letterhead. Jerome isn't a lawyer, Regina. He's a former graphic designer arrested 2 years ago for document forgery, never prosecuted due to lack of evidence. My heart pounded. This wasn't desperate impulse. It was a calculated fraud scheme, weeks in the making. There's more, Maria said. Surveillance photos show your sister meeting with Jerome at various locations over the past month. They've been planning this. I also found evidence she's been researching your husband's medical history through less than legal means. What do you mean? I asked. Someone using her credit card paid for a background check service accessing medical billing records. It looks like she was trying to find out about Malcolm's health conditions, but missed the vasectomy info because it was coded under a different specialty. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Jasmine researched Malcolm's diabetes, thinking he confided in her during his final vulnerable months. She partnered with a known forger to create convincing legal papers. She even timed her story to Malcolm's January 2019 medical appointments, unaware those were the dates confirming his sterility. Maria, document everything. Photos, financial records, evidence of meetings with this Jerome, organized and ready for presentation. What's your next move? Maria asked. I looked across the street at the park where Malcolm and I used to walk, feeling his presence guide my decision. I'm giving Jasmine exactly what she asked for, I said. A family meeting to discuss the will. Only it won't be the meeting she's expecting. That evening, I called every close family member. Aunt Dorothy, Cousin Michael, Mrs. Patterson. There's been some confusion about Malcolm's will. We need to clarify everything. Sunday afternoon, my house. Jasmine has documents, and I have information to share. I called Jasmine last. I could hear the excitement in her voice. She thought she was walking into her moment of triumph, ready to claim half of everything Malcolm and I built. Instead, she was walking into a trap 28 years in the making, set by a woman who loved her husband enough to memorize every medical detail, and now had the evidence to destroy her lies. Sunday afternoon arrived with crisp March weather Malcolm always loved. Sunshine streamed through our living room, illuminating the hardwood floors we'd refinished. I arranged chairs in a semicircle around our coffee table, where Malcolm balanced his client's books beside me. Aunt Dorothy arrived first, with pound cake, treating it like a normal gathering. She settled into Malcolm's armchair, the burgundy leather still holding the faint impression of his body. Regina, honey, she said softly. Are you sure you're ready? Whatever Jasmine says, it doesn't change who Malcolm was, or how much he loved you. Cousin Michael and Linda came next, looking uncomfortable. Mrs. Patterson from next door knocked at 2. Thermos of sweet tea, navy dress, pearl brooch. Regina, dear, she whispered. Malcolm spoke of you like you hung the moon. Don't you forget that. By 2:15, 7 adults filled our living room, nervous energy palpable. I stood near the kitchen doorway, near our landline and the manila folders I'd placed strategically. At 2:20, Jasmine's car door slammed. I watched her stride up our walkway, a red power suit, leather briefcase, an unmistakable air of confidence. Family, she announced, entering our living room, foregoing pleasantries. Thank you for coming. Regina and I have important business regarding Malcolm's final wishes. She set her briefcase on our coffee table with a theatrical flourish, the very heart of our home. The symbolism was not lost on me. She was literally placing her lies there. Jasmine, I said, making my voice sound fragile. I've been thinking about what you told me at Devon's party. I'm still so confused. Could you please explain everything again? In front of everyone. Her eyes lit up with predatory satisfaction. She thought I was offering a perfect audience for her performance, validating her claims, pressuring me. Of course, Regina, she said, opening her briefcase to reveal multiple copies of the fraudulent will. I know this is difficult, but Malcolm made his wishes very clear. She distributed copies, handling them like a lawyer presenting evidence. Aunt Dorothy put on her reading glasses, studying the document with growing confusion. Cousin Michael frowned. Mrs. Patterson shook her head slowly. As you can all see, Jasmine continued, Malcolm revised his will just 2 months before his death. He acknowledged my son Devon as his biological child and left him 50% ownership of this house. The room fell silent, save for the tick of our grandfather clock, the same clock that marked every important moment of our marriage. I watched Jasmine scan their faces, feeding off their shock. Malcolm came to me in January, she went on, her voice rehearsed. He was consumed with guilt about the affair and wanted to do right by his son. He said Regina had been distant, always working, and he'd found comfort with me. Tears welled in my eyes, not difficult given her cruelty, and I dabbed at them with a tissue. Jasmine, I just don't understand how this could have happened. Malcolm and I told each other everything. Not everything, apparently, Jasmine said with false sympathy. But Regina, this is what Malcolm wanted. Devon is his son, and this house belongs to both of you now. Aunt Dorothy cleared her throat. Jasmine, child, this is a serious accusation about a man who can't defend himself. It's not an accusation, Aunt Dorothy, Jasmine replied smoothly. It's documented fact. Look at Devon's eyes, his chin. The resemblance is undeniable. I stood slowly, wrapping my arms around myself, as if holding my shattered world together. If this is really what Malcolm wanted, I said, my voice barely a whisper, Then I suppose we need to make this official. Jasmine leaned forward eagerly. What do you mean? Well, I said, walking towards the kitchen, where my manila folders waited. If we're going to divide the house according to Malcolm's will, we should probably contact lawyers right away. Get everything appraised. Transfer the deed. Make sure Devon's inheritance is properly protected. The greed in Jasmine's eyes was unmistakable. She practically salivated at the prospect of immediate action. She'd already spent my money in her mind, planning to pay off debts, start fresh. That's exactly what we should do, she said, smoothing her red suit. I've already contacted a real estate appraiser. She thinks we could get at least $500,000, maybe more. $500,000, I repeated, as if overwhelmed. That's $250,000 for Devon, plus interest and appreciation. Jasmine added quickly, unable to hide her excitement. This house has been a good investment. Malcolm was smart to secure Devon's future this way. I nodded slowly, then looked at our family. Since everyone's here, and since this affects all of us, maybe we should call Malcolm's lawyer right now. Get everything started today. Today? Jasmine asked, triumph in her voice. She thought my grief and shock made me rush to surrender everything. Yes, today, I said, reaching for the landline. In fact, I think Robert Morrison should join us here so we can handle everything properly. Would that work for you, Jasmine? Regina, that would be perfect, she said, glowing. The sooner we settle this, the better for everyone. I dialed Robert's number, watching Jasmine's face. Robert, it's Regina. Could you come over to the house right now? Yes, that's right. Bring all of Malcolm's estate documents. We have some family business to settle. As I hung up, Jasmine organized her fake copies, preparing for her moment of ultimate victory. She had no idea Robert Morrison was driving towards our house with evidence that would destroy every one of her lies. In 30 minutes, her entire world would collapse. She was eagerly helping me build the stage for her own destruction. Robert Morrison arrived exactly 30 minutes later, carrying his familiar brown leather briefcase, the same grave expression from Malcolm's funeral. But today, a quiet intensity in his eyes spoke of a prosecutor preparing a closing argument. Good afternoon, everyone, Robert said, nodding respectfully. Regina, I have all the documents you requested. Jasmine practically bounced in her seat, clutching her fake will copies. Mr. Morrison, I'm so glad you're here. Regina and I need to discuss Malcolm's revised will and how to proceed with the property division. Robert set his briefcase on our coffee table, directly across from Jasmine's fraudulent papers. His worn leather case, faithfully serving our family for years, contrasted sharply with her sleek briefcase filled with lies. Before we begin, Robert said, his voice carrying the authority of 3 decades in law, I need to clarify something important. I was Malcolm Williams' attorney for 15 years and personally handled all his legal affairs until his death. He opened his briefcase, withdrawing a thick folder. Malcolm never revised his will after our last meeting in April 2018. Any documents claiming otherwise are fraudulent. The color drained from Jasmine's face, but she rallied quickly. That's impossible. Malcolm came to see you in January. He told me he updated everything. Ma'am, Robert replied calmly. Malcolm Williams never visited my office in January 2019. My appointment records show his last visit was in April 2018, when we finalized his estate planning. I stood slowly, walking to the kitchen counter, where my manila folders waited. Jasmine, there's something I need to show everyone. My hands trembled as I returned, not from grief, but from righteous anger finally finding its voice. You see, when you claimed Malcolm fathered Devon, you forgot about something very important. I opened the first folder, pulling out Dr. Rodriguez's surgical report. Malcolm had a vasectomy on October 23, 2018, months before Devon could possibly have been conceived. Jasmine's mouth fell open. That's not possible. Malcolm never told me. Of course he didn't tell you. I interrupted, my voice growing stronger. Because you weren't having an affair with my husband. You were planning to defraud his widow. I handed the medical records to Aunt Dorothy, who donned her reading glasses, studying the documents. These records show Malcolm was medically sterile by January 2019, I continued. It was physically impossible for him to father any children after his vasectomy. Furthermore, Robert added, pulling out Malcolm's real will. This is Malcolm's actual last will and testament, properly witnessed and notarized. It leaves everything to Regina, with contingent beneficiaries being Jasmine and her children only in the event of Regina's death. Jasmine shook her head frantically. No, you don't understand. Malcolm told me about the medical procedure, but it wasn't successful. He said the doctors made mistakes. Jasmine, stop lying, I said firmly. I opened my second folder, revealing Maria's investigation report. I hired a private investigator who discovered some very interesting facts about your recent activities. The room fell silent as I spread surveillance photos of Jasmine meeting with Jerome Hartwell around Atlanta. You've been planning this fraud for weeks with Jerome Hartwell, the man whose name appears on your fake legal letterhead. Except Jerome isn't a lawyer, Jasmine. He's a document forger with a criminal history. Cousin Michael leaned forward, examining the photographs. Jasmine, is this really you? I can explain, Jasmine started, but I wasn't finished. The investigation also revealed you owe $75,000 in debt. You're facing eviction. Your car was repossessed last month. I pulled out copies of her financial records. You researched Malcolm's medical history illegally, trying to find information to support your lies. Mrs. Patterson gasped audibly. Child, what have you done? Jasmine's facade cracked. She buried her face in her hands, her red power suit suddenly a costume. You don't understand the pressure. The bills, creditors, Devin needing things I can't afford. So, you decided to steal from me? I asked, my voice echoing. You thought you could use my grief as a weapon to take everything Malcolm and I built. Regina, please. Jasmine looked up, tears streaming. I never meant for it to go this far. Jerome said it would be simple, that you'd just agree to share the house. Aunt Dorothy set down the medical records, staring at Jasmine with profound disappointment. Baby girl, how could you dishonor Malcolm's memory like this? How could you put Regina through this pain? And what about Devin? Cousin Michael added, his voice sharp. You used that innocent child as part of your scheme. Told him lies about his parentage for money. Jasmine's breakdown intensified. I thought if I could just get enough money, I could start over. Devin deserves better than what I can give him. Devin deserves better than a mother who commits fraud. Robert said bluntly, Ma'am, what you've done constitutes multiple felonies: document forgery, fraud, identity theft, and potentially extortion. The weight of her situation finally hit Jasmine. She looked around the room at faces that had once loved and trusted her, seeing only shock, anger, disappointment. Regina, she whispered, what happens now? I looked at my sister, this stranger who shared my blood but not my values, a complex mix of anger for her cruelty, disappointment for who she'd become, but underneath, a deep sadness for the girl I'd helped raise, the woman who'd been my confidant. What happens now, Jasmine? I said quietly. It depends entirely on what you're willing to do to make this right. The grandfather clock chimed, marking the end of Jasmine's fraud and the beginning of consequences. In 1 hour, I had systematically destroyed every lie, exposed every forged document, revealed every desperate scheme. But the story wasn't over. Now came the hardest part: deciding what justice really looked like when the criminal was your own sister. The silence in our living room was deafening. Jasmine sat hunched, her red power suit wrinkled, makeup streaked. The confident woman who walked through my door an hour ago was gone, replaced by someone broken, desperate, finally truthful. Regina, Jasmine whispered, her voice raw. I know what I did was unforgivable. I know you have every right to call the police. Robert cleared his throat, opening his legal pad. Regina, with this evidence, the district attorney has a strong case for multiple felony charges. Document forgery alone carries 1 to 3 years in prison. Aunt Dorothy shook her head sadly. Jasmine, baby, what were you thinking? This isn't the girl we raised. I wasn't thinking, Jasmine said, finally meeting our eyes. Debt collectors called daily. Devin's daycare threatened to drop him. My landlord filed eviction papers. I had nowhere else to turn. She wiped her nose with a crumpled tissue. When Malcolm died, I kept thinking about this house, its value. I remembered his diabetes complications, and I thought maybe I could claim he'd been confused, made people believe he'd promised me something. So, you contacted Jerome Hartwell? Robert asked. Jerome found me, Jasmine admitted. He heard about Malcolm's death, Approached me at the grocery store. He said he could help me claim what I deserved as family, that rich widows shouldn't keep everything when children were struggling. Cousin Michael scoffed. And you believed that garbage? I was desperate, Jasmine said, her voice breaking. Jerome made it sound so reasonable, so justified. He said families take care of each other, and Regina would probably want to help anyway. A strange calmness settled over me. Anger still burned, but it was tempered by profound sadness for the choices that brought us here. Jasmine, I said quietly, why didn't you just ask me for help? The question hung in the air like smoke. Jasmine stared at me, shock in her eyes, as if simply asking for assistance had never occurred to her. I don't know, she said finally. Pride, maybe. Shame about how bad things got. Fear you'd judge me. Mrs. Patterson leaned forward. Child, Regina helped you with rent for 6 months after Devon was born. She threw your baby shower in this house. What made you think she wouldn't help now? This time was different, Jasmine said. The amount I owed, the trouble I was in. It wasn't just a few hundred anymore. Everything was falling apart. I stood and walked to our front window, looking at the azalea bushes Malcolm planted. In a few weeks, they'd bloom in brilliant pink and white, as they had for 20 years. Some things endured, no matter the chaos. Robert, I said, turning back. What would happen to Devon if Jasmine were prosecuted and convicted? Child Protective Services would likely place him in foster care or with relatives, Robert replied. It would be extremely traumatic for a child his age. I looked at Jasmine, seeing not the calculating fraud, but the scared 9-year-old who cried in my arms when our parents died. The young woman who asked me to be Devon's godmother. The sister who brought me soup last winter. Jasmine, I said, my voice steady and clear. I'm going to give you a choice you don't deserve, but one Malcolm would have wanted me to offer. Hope flickered in her eyes. I won't press criminal charges, I continued, but only if you agree to my conditions. Anything, Jasmine said immediately. Regina, I'll do anything. First, you'll write a detailed confession about this entire fraud scheme, including Jerome's involvement. You'll sign it in front of Robert as a witness. This document will clear Malcolm's name completely, establishing the truth about your lies. Jasmine nodded frantically. Yes, of course. Second, you'll call every single person at Devon's birthday party and tell them the truth. You'll explain you lied about Malcolm being Devon's father, that you forged legal documents and tried to defraud me during my grief. I'll call them tonight, Jasmine promised. Third, you'll enter financial counseling and therapy. You'll learn to manage money responsibly and address whatever emotional issues led you to think this fraud was acceptable. Regina, I'll start this week if you can help me find the resources. I took a deep breath before my final condition. And fourth, I'm going to pay off your debts and help you find stable housing for you and Devon. The room erupted in surprised murmurs. Aunt Dorothy gasped. Cousin Michael looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Regina, no, Robert said firmly. You don't owe her anything after what she's done. I'm not doing this for her, I replied. I'm doing it for Devon, who deserves stability. I'm doing it for Malcolm, who would have wanted me to choose mercy over vengeance. And I'm doing it for myself, because I refuse to let Jasmine's choices turn me into someone bitter and unforgiving. Jasmine was sobbing now, but these were different tears. Tears of gratitude. Regina, I don't understand. Why would you help me after what I tried to do? I walked to Malcolm's favorite chair, placed my hand on the burgundy leather, feeling his presence guide my words. Because Jasmine, that's what family really means. Not DNA or blood or inheritance claims. Real family means choosing love, even when someone doesn't deserve it. I looked around the room at the faces of people who'd supported me. You tried to steal my house, but you can't steal the love Malcolm and I built here. You tried to destroy his memory, but you only made me more determined to honor it. So, here's what's going to happen. You're going to accept my help, follow my conditions, and spend the rest of your life proving you deserve the second chance I'm giving you. Jasmine wiped her eyes, looking at me with something I hadn't seen in years. Genuine remorse, overwhelming gratitude. Regina Williams, she said, voice trembling. You are a better person than I ever deserved as a sister. No, I replied, smiling for the first time since Malcolm's funeral. I'm exactly the person Malcolm helped me become. Now it's time for you to become the person Devon needs you to be. 18 months later, I sit in my kitchen on a Sunday morning. Devon chases butterflies in my backyard. Jasmine prepares lunch at the counter where I once spread evidence of her lies. The transformation is remarkable, not just in her circumstances, but in the woman she's become. Jasmine found employment at East Point Community Health Center 3 months after our confrontation, starting as a receptionist, proving reliable and compassionate. Her supervisor recently promoted her to patient coordinator, a role helping families navigate healthcare and financial assistance. The irony is not lost on us. The woman who tried to defraud her family now helps others find legitimate resources. Regina, Jasmine says, looking up from making sandwiches. Dr. Martinez wants to nominate me for the Employee Excellence Award this quarter. That's wonderful, I tell her, meaning it completely. Malcolm would be proud of how hard you've worked to rebuild your life. The therapy sessions weren't easy. Jasmine resisted Dr. Foster's questions about money, inadequacy, and the shame that drove her. But gradually, week by week, she unraveled the emotional knots that led her to Jerome Hartwell's manipulative promises. I realized I'd been living in crisis mode for so long, I forgot what stability felt like, she told me. When you're drowning in debt and fear, criminal behavior starts looking like the only life preserver. Financial counseling proved equally transformative. Margaret Chen, the counselor Robert recommended, helped Jasmine create her first budget, establish an emergency fund, and understand emotional spending patterns. More importantly, Margaret taught her to ask for help appropriately instead of suffering in silence until desperation made terrible choices seem reasonable. Devon thrives in ways that break my heart with joy. At 3.5, he's confident, curious, remarkably articulate. The stability Jasmine found through steady employment and proper housing allowed him to flourish. Aunt Regina, he calls from the backyard, holding a dandelion. This flower is yellow like sunshine, just like your smile. I call back, watching him beam. Devon doesn't remember the turmoil, but he benefits from the security that emerged. Jasmine enrolled him in an excellent preschool. He shows signs of intelligence and creativity running in our family. Best of all, he has a mother who is present and stable, not consumed by financial terror. For my part, the past 18 months brought unexpected healing. Establishing the Malcolm Williams Educational Excellence Scholarship Fund gave me a meaningful way to honor my husband's memory, helping other adult learners pursue dreams. 3 students at Georgia State University now receive support for accounting degrees, continuing Malcolm's legacy of determination. I've also found profound comfort in grief counseling sessions at Mount Olive Baptist Church. Dr. Sarah Thompson, our counselor, helped me understand that choosing forgiveness didn't diminish my love for Malcolm or minimize Jasmine's pain. Instead, it honored the man who always believed in second chances and redemption. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened, Dr. Thompson explained. It's about refusing to let someone else's worst moment define the rest of your story. The church community embraced both Jasmine and Devon with a grace that makes faith feel tangible. Jasmine volunteers in the children's ministry now, teaching Sunday school to 4-year-olds who adore her patience and creativity. Watching her read Bible stories about mercy and redemption, I see glimpses of the woman she was always meant to become. Our relationship will never be what it was before her betrayal. There's a weariness, a recognition that trust rebuilds gradually through consistent actions, not emotional promises. But there's also a deeper appreciation for what family can mean when chosen consciously, not assumed carelessly. Regina, Jasmine says, setting down the knife. I know I can never fully repay what you did. The money was one thing, but the chance to rebuild my life, to become a better mother for Devon, that's a gift I'll spend forever trying to deserve. You don't need to repay it, I tell her, thinking of Malcolm's wisdom about grace being most powerful when unearned. You just need to keep becoming the person you're capable of being. Looking back on that terrible Sunday afternoon when Jasmine tried to steal my home and destroy Malcolm's memory, I realize her fraud attempt became the catalyst for both of us finding better versions of ourselves. She learned desperation doesn't justify deception, that asking for help requires courage, but leads to real solutions. I learned mercy isn't weakness, it's the strongest possible choice when someone has given you every reason to choose otherwise. True family isn't about blood or inheritance or shared history. It's about love that chooses to see potential even in the worst circumstances. It's about support that doesn't depend on deserving it. Most importantly, it's about doing what's right, even when what's right is also what's hardest. If someone you trusted has betrayed you, remember that choosing mercy doesn't mean choosing to be weak. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is help someone find their way back to who they're supposed to be. Sometimes, the greatest victory isn't in punishing someone for their worst moment, but in giving them the chance to discover their best one. Malcolm taught me that love multiplies when you give it away, even to people who've hurt you. 18 months later, watching Devon play in our backyard while Jasmine hums in our kitchen, I know he was right. Love always wins, especially when you choose it over revenge. Sarah understood nurses sometimes protected patients from complicated family situations. "Give me 20 minutes," she said. "I'll pull the file and call you back." Those 20 minutes felt like hours. Maya and I watched Corey and Lakeisha's domestic fantasy on the monitors while I waited. When Sarah called back, her voice was different, professional, careful, concerned. "Christine, I pulled the file, and I think you need to see this in person. Can you come to the hospital? There are some things we should discuss privately." An hour later, I sat in Sarah's office as she spread Lakeisha Williams' medical records across her desk. What I saw made my blood run cold. "Initial report lists this as a motor vehicle accident," Sarah said, pointing. "Single car collision. Patient found unconscious. But look at the intake notes from the ER physician." I read, "Patient regained consciousness during treatment. Questioned about accident. Became agitated. Stated, 'I just wanted it to stop hurting.' Significant emotional distress noted. Psychiatric consultation recommended." "Keep reading," Sarah said quietly. The psychiatric evaluation was damning. "Dr. Rebecca Chen's notes painted a picture of profound emotional crisis. Patient reports 2-year relationship with married man who refuses to leave his wife. States she has been living in limbo, waiting for promises that never come true. Admits to feelings of hopelessness about the relationship and her future. Asked directly about circumstances of accident. Patient broke down. Admitted, 'I couldn't take waiting anymore. I thought if something happened to me, he'd finally realize how much he loved me.'" My hand shook as I read the clinical assessment. Suicide attempt by intentional vehicle collision. Patient drove into concrete barrier at approximately 35 miles per hour after argument with boyfriend about timeline for ending his marriage. "She tried to kill herself," I whispered. "And look at who's listed as her emergency contact on every single form," Sarah said, pointing. "Corey Jones. Fiancé. Corey Jones. Primary contact. Corey Jones. Person authorized to make medical decisions. He signed all these forms." Sarah continued. "Insurance authorizations. Treatment approvals. Psychiatric consultation consent. He's been acting as her next of kin for 3 weeks." But there was more. Dr. Chen's notes included details of conversations with Corey. Emergency contact states, patient has been emotionally unstable for several months. Has threatened self-harm before when he tried to take space in their relationship. Contact appears genuinely concerned about patient's mental health, but mentions his own wife is also going through emotional difficulties and may need psychiatric evaluation. Extended inpatient mental health treatment. My breath caught. "Sarah, what does extended inpatient treatment mean in this context? For a suicide attempt with ongoing emotional instability, we're talking a potential 72-hour psychiatric hold, possibly longer if deemed a danger to herself or others." I stared at the records. Pieces of a horrific puzzle clicking into place. "He's been positioning both of us as mentally unstable." "What do you mean?" "He told the psychiatric team that his wife is going through emotional difficulties and might need evaluation. He's setting up a narrative where both women in his life are psychologically unstable. Sarah's face paled. Christine, if he's planning to have you declared mentally incompetent, he could control everything. The house, the savings, the divorce proceedings. He could claim I'm too unstable to make rational decisions about the marriage. My phone buzzed. A text from Maya. Got the financial records. You need to see this immediately. I thanked Sarah, rushed back to our apartment, where Maya had spreadsheets covering every surface. Look at this, she said, pointing to bank statements from our joint savings. 3 major withdrawals in the past month, all for medical expenses not covered by insurance. The numbers made my stomach lurch. $15,000 for psychiatric consultation and extended care, $1,000 for a private room, $12,000 for experimental therapy consultation. He's been paying for private psychiatric treatment, Maya said. But here's the interesting part. Look at what he discussed with the billing department. She handed me a transcript of Corey's conversation. Mr. Jones inquired about payment plans for extended psychiatric care for PM-TWAP-M. patients. Maya read. He specifically asked about procedures for when family members need to make financial decisions for relatives who are not mentally competent to handle their own affairs. 2 patients. He's been planning to have both of us declared mentally incompetent, I said, the full scope of his manipulation finally clear. Lakeshia, because of her suicide attempt. And me, because of supposed emotional difficulties during our separation. And if you're both declared incompetent, Maya finished, guess who gets to make all the financial and legal decisions? The elegant cruelty of it took my breath away. Corey hadn't just been having an affair. He'd been orchestrating a complete takeover of everyone's lives, positioning himself as the rational, responsible man surrounded by unstable women who needed his protection and control. But he made one critical mistake, Maya said, gathering the documents. He documented everything. Every signature as Lakeshia's fiancé, every payment from your joint account, every conversation about mental competency. It's all evidence of fraud. What kind of fraud? Financial fraud, insurance fraud, and potentially conspiracy to commit guardianship fraud. He's been using your money to pay for another woman's medical care while simultaneously building a case to have you declared incompetent. That's not just adultery, Christine. That's criminal. I looked at the monitors, at Corey and Lakeshia in our house, planning their future while he schemed to destroy both our lives. So, what do we do now? Maya's smile was sharp, predatory. Now, we turn his own plan against him. He wants to play the game of mental competency. Let's show him what a truly strategic mind looks like when it's fighting for survival. How? We give him exactly what he's been planning. A public confrontation where everyone can see who's really stable and who's been living in a fantasy world built on lies. She was right. Corey had been so busy manipulating the narrative, he'd forgotten one crucial detail. The woman he was trying to destroy had 30 years of experience keeping people alive under pressure. I was about to show him what that looked like when the stakes were my own life. The plan Maya and I devised was elegant. Give Corey what he wanted, a public forum to play the concerned husband dealing with an unstable wife, then systematically destroy that narrative. We need witnesses, Maya explained. Not just family, but colleagues, friends, people whose opinions he values. When we expose him, it needs to be complete and irreversible. I called Corey on Thursday evening, voice trembling with manufactured surrender. Corey, I've been thinking about what you said, about needing space. And I think you're right. I think I've been holding on to something that's already over. His voice was cautious, but hopeful. But before we make any final decisions, I'd like one last family dinner. To honor what we built, even if we can't save it. There was a long pause. What kind of dinner? Nothing big. Just your parents. My sister. Maybe Marcus and Jasmine. A chance to tell everyone together what's happening. We owe them that. I could almost hear him calculating the optics, a gracious, mature ending, with him playing the patient husband. That sounds reasonable, he said. When? Saturday evening. I can cook one last time, like the old days. All right, Saturday it is. Corey didn't know I'd been planning this dinner for 3 days. The guest list included his law partner David Morrison, our neighbors, my nursing supervisor, Janet, and others whose respect Corey valued. Maya had contacted each, explaining Christine and Corey had an important announcement. More importantly, Maya arranged for her associate, attorney Rebecca Foster, to attend as a family friend. Saturday afternoon, I returned home for the first time. Corey and Lakesha had been busy. Many of my items were missing. Furniture rearranged. Family photos replaced with empty frames. Christine, Corey said when I walked into the kitchen, his voice carefully modulated. You look tired. I've been doing a lot of thinking, I replied, setting grocery bags on the counter. About us. Our future. What's best for everyone. And what have you decided? I've decided you're right. Some things can't be saved once they're broken. I began unpacking ingredients for his favorite meal. Herb-crusted lamb. The dinner I'd made for every special occasion. But I want our families to understand why. He visibly relaxed, assuming I was taking responsibility for our failure. The guests arrived at 6. Corey played the perfect host, greeting everyone with warmth, subdued sadness, staging his own performance as the devoted husband. Where is Christine? His mother asked. She's in the kitchen, Corey said gently. She's been going through a difficult time lately. Some emotional challenges that have been hard on both of us. Emotional challenges. The groundwork for his mental instability narrative, laid perfectly before witnesses. At 7, I called everyone to the dining room. The table was set with our wedding china, the dishes Lakesha had dismissed as hideous, but which represented 32 years of Christmas and anniversary dinners. Corey sat at the head, playing the gracious host, while I served the meal I'd perfected. This looks wonderful. Christine, David Morrison said, raising his glass. Corey's told me how much he'll miss your cooking. Has he? I said quietly, taking my seat. That's interesting, because I wasn't aware he'd discussed our personal business with colleagues. An uncomfortable silence fell. Corey's face flushed, but he maintained composure. Christine, I think people are just concerned about us, he said, using the patient tone reserved for the unreasonable. Of course they are. That's why I asked everyone here tonight. I stood, my hands steady despite the adrenaline. Because I have some things I need to share with all of you. Christine, maybe we should, Corey started. Maybe we should what? Corey? Maybe I should continue pretending I don't know what's been happening? Maybe I should keep playing the confused, emotionally unstable wife while you rewrite our history. The dining room went silent. Corey's eyes darted, calculating. Christine, you're not well. Everyone can see you're struggling. What everyone can see, I interrupted, is a woman who's finally tired of being gaslit by a man who's been living a double life for 2 years. Marcus's fork clattered. What are you talking about? Instead of answering, I walked to the living room and returned with a laptop and speaker system. I think it's better if I show you rather than tell you. Corey's face went white. Christine, what are you doing? I'm telling our family the truth. I connected the laptop, pulled up the first audio file. Leksha's voice filled the room. Who are all these people in the photos? Corey's voice followed. Just some old family stuff. We'll replace all of this with our own memories. This woman appears in a lot of them. She looks familiar. That's Christine. She's just someone I used to know. She lived here before, but that's all over now. The silence was deafening. I watched Corey's mother's face crumple as she heard her son dismiss his wife of 32 years. Christine, where did you get this? Corey demanded, composure finally cracking. From the surveillance cameras Maya and I installed in our house before I left. I gestured toward the door, where Maya and Rebecca Foster had just entered. The same cameras that recorded you bringing another woman into our marriage bed. You were spying on me. I was documenting criminal behavior, Maya said, stepping forward with a thick folder. Financial fraud, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit guardianship fraud. She spread bank statements across the table. Corey has been using joint marital funds to pay for his girlfriend's medical expenses while simultaneously building a case to have Christine declared mentally incompetent. David Morrison leaned forward. Lawyer instincts engaged. What kind of medical expenses? Psychiatric treatment following a suicide attempt. Rebecca Foster said, pulling out hospital records. Mr. Jones has been acting as emergency contact and medical decision-maker for Ms. Lakeisha Williams while she receives treatment for intentionally crashing her car. Gasps. Corey's father pushed back, staring at his son. A suicide attempt. Janet, my nursing supervisor, asked. Corey, you've been managing medical care for someone who's not family. It's not what it looks like. Corey started. It's exactly what it looks like. Maya interrupted, playing another audio file. This time, Corey's voice. She got old. Some people just don't age well. They get comfortable. Stop taking care of themselves. Stop being interesting. You know how it is. My mother-in-law made a choking sound. But that's not the worst part, I said, my voice steady. The worst part is that he's been telling medical professionals that I'm also mentally unstable and might need psychiatric evaluation. He's been positioning both of us as incompetent so he could control our finances and legal decisions. Rebecca Foster placed a legal document in front of Corey. These are divorce papers. Already filed. Christine is citing adultery, financial fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She's also filing criminal charges for fraud and identity theft. You can't prove any of this, Corey said, but his voice lacked conviction. Actually, we can. Maya held up a flash drive. 3 weeks of video and audio surveillance showing you bringing your girlfriend into the marital home, helping her dispose of Christine's personal belongings, and planning to sell this house without your wife's knowledge or consent. Marcus stood abruptly, his chair scraping. Dad, is this true? Have you been cheating on Mom? Son, it's complicated. It's not complicated, Jasmine said, tears streaming. It's betrayal. The room erupted, family demanding explanations. David Morrison asking legal questions. Neighbors expressing shock. Corey sat frozen, watching his carefully constructed narrative collapse. There is one more thing, I said, and the room quieted again. The divorce settlement includes full custody of this house, half of all assets, including his law practice, and spousal support based on 32 years of marriage. The criminal charges include restitution for all marital funds used for his girlfriend's medical care. Rebecca Foster handed him another set of papers. You're also being served with a restraining order, prohibiting contact with Christine except through legal counsel. As Corey read, his face cycled through shock, anger, resignation. I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, complete control over my own life. The dinner was delicious. By the way, I said, gathering my purse and walking toward the door. It's the last meal I'll ever cook for you. And with that, I walked out of the house where I'd spent 32 years being taken for granted, leaving behind a man who'd finally learned the difference between a devoted wife and someone you used to know. 5 months later, I sat in my new apartment, bright and airy, overlooking the city, furnished with items I'd chosen for myself. I read the final court documents that officially ended my marriage and began my new life. The legal consequences for Corey were swift and devastating. The State Bar Association moved quickly once Rebecca Foster presented evidence of his fraudulent behavior, using client trust account procedures, manipulating medical and financial documents, lying about his marital status on legal forms, attempting to defraud insurance companies. These weren't just personal ethical lapses. They were violations striking at the heart of legal practice. Corey Jones has been permanently disbarred. Maya told me over coffee at my favorite new cafe. His law license is gone. His partnership dissolved. And he owes you $180,000 in restitution for marital funds used fraudulently. The money wasn't what mattered most, though it certainly helped at 55. What mattered was that his ability to manipulate legal systems, the tool he'd used to control Lakeisha and me, had been permanently taken away. What happened to the house? I asked. Sold as per the divorce decree. Your half of the proceeds, plus the alimony settlement, means you never have to work again if you don't want to. But I did want to work. 3 decades of nursing wasn't just my profession. It was who I was. The difference now was that I was returning as Christine Jones, not Corey's wife, who happens to be a nurse. I start back at County General, I told Maya. Same hospital where I met him. But this time, I'm there for me. The emotional closure took longer than the legal resolution. 4 months after the divorce, I'd still wake expecting Corey's voice, his car. 32 years of routine doesn't disappear overnight, even when the person you shared it with turns out to be a stranger. But gradually, I understood the difference between a marriage certificate and true partnership. A certificate is just a legal document, signed by people who lie, manipulate, break vows. True partnership requires daily choice, mutual respect, and honesty. A man who can lie to his wife for years can lie to anyone about anything. I wrote in my journal, thinking of colleagues who trusted him, clients who believed in his integrity, family who looked up to him. Betrayal is never contained to just one relationship. It spreads like infection, touching everyone who believed in the person behind the lies. The hardest part wasn't grieving the marriage. It was forgiving myself for staying blind for so long. I was a trained medical professional, skilled at recognizing symptoms and diagnosing problems. How had I missed the symptoms of deception in my own home? Because you loved him, my new therapist explained. And love makes us want to believe the best in people, even when evidence suggests otherwise. That's not a weakness, Christine. That's what makes you good at caring for others. Learning to trust my instincts again took time, practice. But slowly, I recognized the difference between intuition and paranoia, skepticism and learned helplessness. As for Lakeisha, I chose to see her as another victim, not a villain. Through mutual acquaintances at the hospital, I learned she'd entered intensive therapy for her emotional instability. Without Corey's influence and false promises, she was finally getting the help she needed to build a life based on reality. She sends her apologies through her therapist, Maya told me. Apparently, she had no idea you didn't know about the relationship. Corey told her you were already separated. that the divorce was just a formality. Even in his affair, Corey had been lying to everyone involved. "I hope she finds peace," I said. "She's young enough to build something real with someone who's actually available." My new beginning started small, but significant. I moved into an apartment I could afford on my nursing salary alone. I bought furniture reflecting my taste, not a compromise. I joined a book club, took a painting class, hiked on weekends with new friends. Most importantly, I learned to live for myself. Instead of living as half of a couple that had never been as united as I'd believed. The nursing supervisor position opened at County General 8 months after my divorce. For the first time, I applied for a promotion based solely on my qualifications, not on what would be convenient for my husband's schedule. "The job is yours," Janet told me during the interview. "You've earned it." Standing in the same hospital where I'd met Corey 33 years earlier, wearing scrubs no one would throw away as awful, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: pride in my own accomplishments. That evening, I called Marcus and Jasmine to share the news. Both children had struggled with their father's betrayal, questioning everything they believed about love, marriage, and stability. "Mom, I'm proud of you," Marcus said. "Not just for the promotion, but for how you handled everything. You could have fallen apart, but instead you fought back." "I almost did," I admitted. "But then I remembered I've been taking care of people my whole life. It was time to take care of myself with the same determination." "Do you ever regret staying with Dad for so long?" Jasmine asked. It was a question I'd asked myself countless times. "I regret staying blind to who he really was," I said finally. "But I don't regret the life we built together, because that life gave me you too, and everything I learned about love, sacrifice, and resilience. All of that made me strong enough to survive losing him." As I sit here now, a year and a half after that devastating day, I want to leave you with this. If your gut tells you something's wrong in your relationship, trust that feeling. Don't make excuses for behavior that doesn't align with promises. Don't sacrifice your peace of mind for someone else's convenience. 30 years taught me that love without respect isn't love at all. Real love doesn't require you to become smaller, quieter, or more convenient. Real love doesn't ask you to ignore your instincts or doubt your worth. Lucidity, I've found, is the ultimate revenge.